Welcome to WizeUp. I'm Paul Arthur. Want to chat today about the Conservative convention, their annual convention that recently wrapped up here in Calgary. And the reason we want to touch on this is they had a lot of policy votes on social issues, moral issues that really matter to this nation, I think. Everything from parental rights to abortion to assisted suicide and more. So want to tackle that in a moment. Before we do, a quick reminder to hit subscribe. Tell your friends about us as well. Our guest today, no stranger to television, and that is Faytene Grasseschi. She's the host of the Faytene television program and also the executive director of For My Canada. And, she's been involved in politics, influencing politics for many, many years. And also, by the way, she's got a new book out. It's called If Not Now, Then When? Makes you ponder, right? That's available at Faytene.tv or at Amazon. And also, please check out formycanada.com. So, Faytene, good to have you with us again.
Oh, it's such a joy, Paul. Thank you so much for having me, and greetings to all your incredible viewers.
You bet. You're probably still recovering. I mean, at the time of this taping here, the convention is just kind of wrapped up, so you're probably going on fumes here. So busy stuff happening there. But before we jump into that, why don't you just give us a brief snapshot of your new book? Apparently it's doing really well on Amazon.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, I've got actually, I'm surrounded by them because we just got a big shipment in. But
okay.
Yeah, really excited. Yeah, it's been bestseller on Amazon for an extended period of time. I think it's just dipped down, but it's still like top 10. We launched at the end of November. If not now, then when. The subtitle is Why This Moment Matters for Canada and What We Can Do About It. And basically what I've done in this book here, Paul, is I've taken the last 20 to 30 years of my experience in advocacy, specifically at the faith and government intersection, and put it into a super easy read book. And this is a book for that person out there, Paul, who's saying, I'm concerned about where the nation is going. I don't really know what I can do. I don't really know what difference I can make, but I want to do something. And this is kind of like an on-ramp book. In the second chapter, my favorite chapter, other than the 9th chapter, I've got kind of 2 chapters that are tied for first here. But in my second chapter, I talk about some of the consequential moments in our national history over the last 15 years, particularly looking at elections, whether provincially or federally, where it really came down to just a few votes, which determined the outcome. A lot of people don't know this, Paul, but even in the last federal election, Prime Minister Mark Carney missed getting a majority right out of the gate by only 57 votes in 3 ridings. It was very, very small.
Wow.
If you look at the last provincial election in Newfoundland, Labrador, the majority there was secured for the Conservatives by just 1 riding and 19 votes. There was 1 riding in Quebec, I believe it was, that was determined in the last federal election by just 1 vote. So to that person out there that feels like their vote doesn't make a difference, or their volunteer or their donation doesn't make a difference, this is proof that it does right here. And we ask that question, if not now, then when? For the sake of our kids. We look at so many of the different issues in our nation right now. For those of us that still have hope and still believe, we need to not just get in the game, but get in the game with intelligence. And that's what I hope to accomplish through the book, is help more of those folks get involved.
Yeah, we need to have hope that God actually can change this nation. He's God. And of course he can, right? Yeah, but the funny thing is he likes to work together with his kids, you and me. So we need to agree with him and get in the game, right? So
yeah, well, I do believe we're called the body of Christ, right? Like he's the head. So a system isn't that good of use if the arms and the legs aren't working, right? So that's us.
Yeah, all hands and toes on deck, right? Let's get in there. So you were in there at the CPC convention in Calgary. And again, there's lots of policy votes that happen here. And there may be people watching who don't understand how this all works. So, and again, these are key issues dealing with again, a lot of moral issues that matter. So can you explain how a convention like this works? I mean, they vote on some of the policies. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're binding, that the Conservative Party has to do these things, but it definitely influences. It sends a message to the top brass, the leadership of the parties, that this is where our voter base wants to head, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And all throughout the year in the lead up to policy conventions, they normally happen once every few years. There are individuals like you and me who just get involved right at the local level in what's called a riding association. It can be called a CA or a EDA, depending if you're federal or provincial. And at this level, at this table of discourse, people like you and I can bring forward ideas and say, hey, there's a policy convention coming up. I care about parental rights, or I care
Hmm.
about protecting the vulnerable from being coerced into medical assistance and dying. Or I care about the fact that in Canada, it's legal to abort a baby right at 39 weeks as long as they're still inside their mother's body. If you care about these things, then in the lead up to these policy conventions, you can get involved at the local level and say, hey, I want to be a part of bringing forward a policy to the convention that Canadians from all across Canada who engage in that policy convention can vote on. And if we all agree that this is something that we should do or not do, depending on the wording and the issue, then that is a strong signal to that party, whether it's the Conservative Party, Liberal Party, whatever, that this is what their voter base wants, as you already said. So this is a really, really powerful moment for Canadians to engage with the party that most represents their views and values and has the ability to actually action those views and values. There might be other parties that are smaller, that are less influential, that might more align with your views and values, but if you go to that policy convention, and you should, I encourage people to get involved in everything all the time if
Yeah.
you want to. And these conventions are at different times, so you can, go to them all if you wanted to. But get involved in the ones where you can have the greatest impact. So that's why this convention that just took place in Calgary was so critical, because there is a chance that the Conservatives could form government next. It most likely is either going to be the Liberals or the Conservatives after the next election, whenever that happens. And so the policies that are put forward by everyday Canadians that engage in the process really can have an influence, a major determining influence on what types of things a future Conservative government would be about or would initiate if they form government after the next election. So it was a big moment.
Yeah. Again, these policy conventions actually matter. So let's, I guess, well, you shared a video as well. I think it's probably on your website, formycanada.com. You can check it out there for the full details. But you shared some of the wins. There were some positive things that happened in some of these policy votes. And do you want to share some of those? I think you started with the charitable tax status for pro-life groups. Of course, that was potentially under threat, last year. So how did they vote on that?
Yeah, well, that was low hanging fruit, right? It was something that everybody could really agree on easily, whether they were fiscally conservative or socially conservative. So that one passed with flying colors. There are two steps to a policy being passed. Number one, like once it gets to the actual convention, number one is it's got to win kind of in the semifinals. So there's this, there are a whole bunch of policies in different categories that get put forward. But at the end of the day, out of about 90 policies, only 30 get actually to what's called the final round or the final four. And so that policy that a Conservative government, if elected, would protect faith-based charities, passed with flying colors, both in the semifinals and then again on the floor of the House of Commons. Obviously, this is something, like I already mentioned, that people on all ends of the spectrum could agree on, but also people of all faiths could agree on. And so it was an easy win, that one.
Okay. And one thing that apparently passed, and I'm glad it did. I don't know all the details on it here, but I guess we get tired of reading the news and finding out that, okay, we had a great candidate in this particular riding here, and it didn't somehow get approved by party brass. Now they can't run, to be the representative for the Conservative Party or for whatever party. So what happened with that one there?
Yeah, and this issue of defending democracy at what's called the grassroots or nomination level is a really big one for all parties. But in the last federal election in the lead up, depending on who you talk to, I've heard some pundits say that up to 100 ridings across Canada there really wasn't a fair grassroots nomination, that candidates were just kind of appointed by what's called the OLO, the official leader's office. And so, that really rattled a lot of people on the ground. For example, I was in a riding in St. John where we had St. John, New Brunswick, we had 4 incredible candidates. 2 of them were socially progressive, 2 of them were socially conservative. And what happened is, for whatever reason, the OLO just didn't call the nomination race. So you have to kind of wait for them to call it. And eventually the time ran out. There wasn't time for the actual nomination election by those right there in the community. And then the leader's office ended up just putting in their own candidate. Well, this profoundly upset people on both sides, both the social conservatives and the non-social conservatives.
Yeah.
Everybody quit the board. Everybody was mad. Nobody wanted to support the candidate. And so it is very possible that the Conservatives actually lost several ridings, especially in those sort of battleground zones that came down to just a few votes, just by virtue of the fact that their volunteer base was demotivated by this type of behavior. So there were several policies that came forward, not policies, constitutional amendments, that came forward to try to deal with this dynamic from different angles. It was a bit of a mixed bag in the end. Some of those constitutional amendments passed. Some of them got voted down. One of the ones that got voted down is there was an amendment that wanted to put limits on how many candidates the leader's office could appoint. That got voted down. But then there were some other ones that would bring checks and balances in terms of giving the local leadership more of a voice in the candidates, requiring the leader's office to have to give a better explanation for why the disqualifications, these types of things. But I will say this, though, Paul, even though some of the pro-democracy constitutional amendments passed, some of them didn't, it was a mixed bag, like I said, it sent a message. Oh my goodness. Like, this was one of the biggest things people were talking about at the convention. And again, people on all sides of the spectrum socially were very concerned about this. So it did send a real message to the leader's office. And this is something that we need to be working for across all party lines. This isn't just a conservative issue. So I do want to say that. I don't want to throw the conservatives unilaterally under the bus. I think other parties have this same challenge.
Yeah.
But good on the conservative base for really saying, like, hey, we want Canada to belong to Canada. We want the people to decide who the candidates are. I think that's super healthy.
Absolutely. Other wins you mentioned were protecting property rights, gun rights, the Jordan Peterson policy, protecting professionals from compelled speech. So that's a good thing. And interesting as well, the policy to use cash even if society moves to a digital currency. So I'm glad they passed something like that. And you mentioned something interesting, which I think is really, really key, and that is you saw a lot of church unity at this political convention. I mean, it's not a church convention, but again, for believers to get involved, and of course, there's all kinds of different denominational backgrounds, and sometimes we're at each other's throats over, some pretty bizarre things sometimes, the color of the carpet or whatever it might be. So, but you saw some unity there.
Yeah, more and more believers are just saying this, if not now, then when, right? So,
hey, come on. Yeah, very good.
And I do want to say this, there is so much mutual respect between the various civic action groups, whether it's For My Canada and CLC, there's the organization Right Now. Of course, there's the amazing Doug Sharp with the National Leadership Briefing and Canada Family Action, ARPA as well. And all of these different citizen action groups, encourage their people to get involved with democracy. They were there in some way, shape, or form. Some were more organized than others. Some were a little bit more organic, but everybody was working together. There was powerful unity, and there was this mutual understanding that together we're stronger, and it was really, really powerful. I do want to say this, though. I don't believe it was the most or best attended political conference when it comes to the ratio of faith-based individuals. I think some organizations have had better attendance within their network in previous years. I'm happy to say that our group, there were so many from For My Canada within our network that were there for the first time, getting involved. I just loved it. There were so many that were saying, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm just here because I want to make a difference. And, those are the people that are the change agents. Those are the ones that make the difference. And as I'm sure we'll talk about here in a second, there were a couple of votes that came down to just a few people.
Let's talk about that. It's again, that's the downside, right? We were close in quite a few of the votes that really mattered, but ended up on the wrong side of the ballot. So abortion. Now there's a policy that was voted on that would repeal the current conservative government party position that no anti-abortion actions will be put forward by the party, right? So tell us how that went there.
Yeah, and for your viewers, I think it's important to set the context for this.
Yeah.
And that's that currently in Canada, there are no laws on abortion. So the law on abortion was struck down, I believe it was in 1988 by the Supreme Court of Canada. It was struck down as unconstitutional. At that time, the Supreme Court basically said back to Parliament, hey, we've struck down the current law as unconstitutional, but now we want Parliament to bring forward another law. Now, this happened with medical assistance in dying. This happened with prostitution. And the abortion issue is the only issue in our national history, as I understand it, where the Supreme Court has charged Parliament to bring forward a bill, and Parliament has never done it. They've never obeyed that admonition or never been able to successfully do it. There was a vote that came down in the late 80s with Brian Mulroney that lost by just one vote in the Senate. But there is no law on abortion right now. And in the absence of a law, it's kind of like the speed limit in Montana, right? Where there's no speed limit. You can go 350 kilometers down the road. And even though everybody knows that that's not a good idea, there's no law against it and nobody can give you a ticket. And so it's the same thing with abortion. Because there's no law on abortion, you can abort a baby right now in Canada that is fully formed, fully viable out of its mother's body. So 38, 39 weeks, 30 weeks, 28 weeks, a perfectly healthy baby when there's no risk to the mother. And so this is legal in Canada, and recent undercover footage has actually shown that it is also happening. So This was a really interesting moment because basically it was a crisis of conscience moment where members of the party were asked to vote on whether or not the Conservative Party would consider bringing forward some sort of a law or a limit on abortion. Now, we are the only Western nation in the entire world that doesn't have some limits on abortion. So we are very radical, very offside, even with what our colleagues on the international stage have for legislation. So in the end, the vote in the room came down to two types of voters from what I could tell. Number one, those that were voting based on principle, the principle of, is this the right thing to do? And those that were voting based on politics, meaning that if we do this, will the liberal media spin this and use this against the Conservatives in the next election? Now, it's my view, Paul, that no matter what the Conservatives do, they're still going to be labeled by liberal-leaning activist media groups as being radically far right, whatever label that is going to be put on them is going to be put on them. So, to me, this was a moment where the members had an opportunity to really say to the social conservatives in Canada, you're still welcome here. And we are willing to side on the issue of principle rather than politics, which I believe many conservatives really resonate with. And so in the end, and I'm sorry for going on so much about this, but I think context is really important because a lot of people don't understand, what was really being voted on here. We were voting on whether or not the Conservative Party affirms third trimester abortion, essentially, is a way that you could have phrased it. So in the end, it came down to a loss of about 76 votes out of a room of about 538. Now, there was lots of movement in the room. And as a matter of fact, right before this vote, there was a large group of individuals that came into the room. And it was clear that they had come in specifically to vote this policy down, and that became very clear. So it was definitely an interesting moment. I think something that people who were voting on the basis of principle were deeply rattled by. It was a very
Mm-hmm.
there was a very ominous kind of feeling in the room, and those that voted for third trimester abortion cheered. And so, I know a
Hmm.
lot of women, Paul, and I can't think of a single woman who's ever had a third trimester abortion that would be cheerful about it. Uh,
No.
it was a very bizarre moment, to be honest. So that one didn't make it past the semifinals, but only by 76 votes. So
Yeah.
76 of your viewers that were
Hmm.
in the room voting for that, somewhere between 76, maybe 150 to be super safe, and that would have made it to the floor.
Hmm. So by the way, I'm wondering, I don't know, but I imagine part of this, because to take part in the convention, you actually have to pay, a fee, a registration fee, which is, I think, is 600 some dollars, right? So it's not cheap. So that probably holds some people back, you know. And again, I think a lot of people simply unaware even that there was a convention. Or if they knew it was, they didn't know that they could get involved and make a difference. That's part of the issue as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that. And I do really think that that's valid. I've heard a lot of people since, even over the last couple of days, say, like, I didn't even know exactly what you said. And that's why citizen action groups like For My Canada, like ARPA, like CLC exist. It's that we exist just to hold people's hands, the people that want to make a difference and maybe, are a little bit sheepish about it, don't really know where the door is. These groups are there to serve in those moments, and they do a fantastic job. So I would just say, get
Hmm.
connected with these groups, and they're the ones that will help you get from here to there.
Okay, very good. All right, and again, if you're just tuning in here, I do want to steer you to formycanada.com. All right, Faytene's group there, as well as Faytene.tv, and again, her book called If Not Now, Then When. And another big issue that came up, policy vote, was on parental rights.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then this one, yeah, I mean, to me, it's a bit disturbing, but I mean, you can give us the details here. But basically, should parents have the right not to affirm, just carte blanche affirm their gender transition that their child is talking about? They might be 4 years old. They might be 8. They might be, 13 or something. And I don't think a lot of people realize that since Bill C-4 was passed, the conversion therapy ban, it actually prevents parents from counseling their kids to, counsel them, hold on a second, let's backpedal here. You're actually a boy, not a girl, and we think we can work this through, right?
Yeah, and what's very interesting about this, it's definitely a case study, is that all of the polling on this issue, Paul, is overwhelmingly in favor of parental rights. Parents do not want to be deleted from the lives of their children by the government or by the
Yeah.
school system. And even people who don't have parents, or excuse me, don't have children, agree with this, by and large. And so most of the polling is well above 70% of Canadians agree with this, some over 90%. And despite that, this vote did fail, and it failed by about 2 votes out of a sea of 1,600. So there were
Wow.
1,600
Wow.
voting delegates on the floor of the House of Commons. And how it works is the majority of those voting have to vote in favor for a policy for it to pass, but also the majority of the regions. And so what happened in this case is the majority of individuals voted in favor of this policy to protect that parent-child relationship in these life-altering moments, not criminalize parents for having a conversation with their children to say, hey, let's have a slow second thought here on this, because once you do it, you can't go back. But what didn't happen was the majority of provinces. And so if you look closely at the data, Paul, you'll see that there were 2 provinces that were within just a couple of votes. One was Manitoba. If there would have been about 2 more votes from the delegates in Manitoba, this policy would have
Hmm.
passed. Or there would have been about 2 more Manitobans in the room. The same can be said for Nova Scotia. If there were
Wow.
just a handful from Nova Scotia. So again, this came down, this historic defining moment, potentially setting the trajectory of the Conservative Party of Canada, which could be the next government federally, literally came down to about 2 people that were absent. right? And so, I remember when David Maines said to me once, "Faytene, the nation goes to those who show up." And I don't mean this as a heavy right now, Paul, but I do think that we need to understand how powerful we are and how powerful our presence is, but also how determining absence can be as well. So it's not like the big bad conservative guys in Ottawa. No, this was the grassroots. These were the people that were in the room and how they voted. Again, coming down to principle versus politics. That's the only way that you can describe that people would
that's
be
so important. And I want to clarify too, for people watching that, I'm not trying to tell you who to vote for. I don't think Faytene is either. Everybody has to make their own decision on that. But as believers, we're encouraging people to make their decisions based on, policies that would best represent Jesus, okay, and how he wants us to live life. So whether you vote for the Green Party, the NDP Party, or whoever, right, get involved and have your say to actually steer that political party to biblical principles here. This is so important. I'm running out of time, but I want to point out here that, we make such a difference when we get involved. You had this whole campaign going here to phone, 12 days of phoning your members of parliament on Bill C9, right, which removes the religious exemption clause here. So it affects free speech, freedom of religion, and so forth. And you had over 40,000 calls that went in there, and so now they paused Bill C9, so that's good news, but they'll probably bring it up here relatively soon as well. So we need to keep their boots to the fire, if you will, right? So important. There may be a spring election coming up. Any final thoughts here on getting people out of their seats and getting involved?
Yeah, well, again, if not now, then when? And just be encouraged. Moments like, what happened this past weekend on those two votes we just talked about can be discouraging, but we do need to turn that pain into power and into purpose. And so I would just encourage people to do the next right thing. The next moment that you have to be a voice and to bring your influence into the scenario, just do it. Yeah, just do it. Oh, man, John 2:5. and his mother said to the servants, whatever he says to you, do it. You know what? That's the original do it. Man, I'm out of time here. Thank you so much, Faytene. ForMyCanada.com. I encourage you to get down there. Again, her book, If Not Now, Then When. Tell your friends about us as well. Hit subscribe, WizeUp.ca. God bless.